The story commences in the year 1874, in the heart of Kansas, where we meet a young college student named Will. Will sets out on a journey to a remote village known for its bison hunters. Upon his arrival, Will immediately seeks the guidance of his father's old friend, MacDonald, a fur trader who regularly deals with the local hunters. Will hopes MacDonald can assist him in joining a bison hunt. However, because this activity is very dangerous and requires a long and arduous journey, and given Will's limited experience, MacDonald refuses to help him. As Will left the place, he stumbled upon one of the hunters, Miller, who appeared to have just sold his bison hides. Will, determined not to let his journey go to waste, decided to follow Miller to a nearby bar, hoping to gain new experiences. Will boldly approached Miller, who was enjoying a drink with his assistant, Sender. He explained his desire for adventure and believed that Miller was the person who could fulfill his wishes. Seeing Will's enthusiasm, Miller saw an opportunity and offered to let Will join the hunt for $500. There was a specific reason for this $500 fee. Miller planned to use it to purchase a horse-drawn carriage, gather supplies, and hire a skilled hide scraper. The location they were heading to was remote and challenging to reach, which required thorough preparation if Will wanted to be part of the hunt. Although Will had $500, it was all the money he had, originally intended for food and lodging. Despite the financial sacrifice, Will agreed to Miller's offer in pursuit of new adventures and experiences. Fred, an expert bison hide scraper, would also be joining their group. The four of them aimed to reach a location with a large, untouched herd of bison, situated far away from other hunters. The journey could take months due to its remote nature, but with Will's $500, they would have enough provisions for the round trip, despite the high risks involved. After a month of traveling, autumn has arrived, and they reach a location with a small herd of bison, which doesn't interest Miller at all. While there, they come across a fellow hunter who has been killed with deer antlers sticking out of their body, emphasizing the high risks of this journey. Soon after, a female traveler and her young son appear, claiming to be lost and thirsty in the barren land. This is where Will finally witnesses Miller's true character. When Miller prohibits Will from giving water to the desperate mother and her son with an unreasonable excuse, it becomes clear that Miller cares more about his horses than the suffering strangers. Meanwhile, Will starts to feel thirsty and isn't allowed to rest for long before leaving the Indian Territory. A day passes without drinking water, and Will begins to hallucinate due to dehydration, accidentally getting separated from the group. Several months pass, and they finally reach high ground. With Will no longer worrying about clean water, the challenges continue. While he and Fred have to push the horse-drawn carriage up a steep slope, just as they reach the summit, Will finally sees the location Miller promised, a massive herd of bison that seems endless. They quickly search for a place to set up camp for a break. The day of the bison hunt had arrived. When the bison group reached the plain near the camp, Will became Miller's assistant. Will's job was to prepare bullets and clean the rifle shells. Miller, as an experienced hunter, easily identified the lead bison. Once its leader was shot, the other bison didn't try to escape. Will was then tasked with fetching a bucket of water from the tent to clean the rifle shells. When he returned, he was shocked to find that Miller had already killed many bison. It seemed that they had hunted enough for the day, and Miller told Will to skin the bison with Fred, who taught him the proper way to do it. Skinning so many bison would take several days, providing Will with a valuable learning experience during his adventure. After Fred and Will finished skinning all the bison, they gathered around a campfire to eat bison meat, which had become their main food for days. Will, feeling tired and eager to return, wondered why Miller didn't seem to have any intention of going back to the village, even though they had gathered more than enough bison hides to make a profit. However, afraid to ask directly, Will chose to remain silent and suppress his curiosity. The next day arrived, and it was pretty clear that Miller had his sights set on a big herd of bison that was still around. Will, who had been curious about Miller's intentions, finally got his answer when Fred casually asked him why he kept hunting the bison. Fred pointed to the pile of bison hides they had gathered, which was enough to cover their expenses and make some profit. Miller explained that their long journey would be a waste if they didn't take full advantage of the opportunity. As the days went by, It became obvious that Miller's obsession with hunting every single bison was growing stronger. He didn't want to leave a single one untouched, even though they already had more bison hides than they needed to make a good profit. 2 weeks passed since they arrived, and it was clear that Miller had no plans of going back. Fred, who was getting tired and bored, spoke up and said that winter was approaching and they should head home. But Miller insisted that there was still enough time to gather more bison hides. As the leader of the group, his decisions couldn't be questioned by anyone. A week later, Miller faced a small issue. The bison herd seemed like it wanted to leave the valley. To stop them, he had to get close and guide them back. But something unexpected happened. Will, who was also tired, did something reckless. He fired his rifle to scare the bison away. He got in trouble for his thoughtless action. At the same time, it started snowing, which meant winter was coming. They had no shelter nearby, and the nearest settlement was far away. They would have to endure the cold winter for about 6 to 8 months. The roads were covered in snow, rivers froze, and it became hard to find food. This was the result of Miller's greed. They were stuck in this place until winter ended, which was 8 long months away. 3 weeks passed, and they faced more problems. They only had 1 bag of nuts left for food, which was barely enough for 1 person. With the snow covering everything, finding something to eat was impossible. They had to defend themselves against hungry wolves. So, besides being hungry and cold, they also had to protect themselves from wild animals that could threaten their lives. 5 months passed, and they survived using firewood and frozen bison meat. Fred accused Sender of trying to poison him with wolf poison. In a moment of desperation, Fred killed Sender, who was also under a lot of stress. Fred insisted he should be paid for skinning the bison and wanted to return home alone. But Miller, who was stronger and had a firearm, made him follow his orders and stay until winter ended. Finally, spring arrived. Miller, Will, and Fred could head back home with the biggest haul of bison hides they had ever seen. They had more hides than any hunter had ever gotten. Since bison hides were selling at a high price, Miller was eager to reach the village and sell them to MacDonald. However, during their journey on a wagon loaded with their haul, the wagon's wheel axle broke, causing Fred to fall. Since they weren't far from their village, Miller and Will decided to go back home to get a new horse-drawn carriage. When they reached the village, they were surprised to find MacDonald's place completely empty, with no one around. After searching the village, Miller finally found MacDonald in his room, and it turned out that the bison hide business had come to an end. Miller and his friends had been on this hunting journey for almost a year. During that time, the price of bison hides in the market had gone down a lot. Almost everyone in the city had bison hides, so they were no longer special or valuable. It meant that all the struggles, adventures, and hardships they went through for a year had been for nothing. If Miller hadn't been so greedy and had brought back enough catch before winter, maybe the prices would have stayed stable, and they could have made a good profit before they dropped. In the end, Miller went back to the ravine and brought back all their catch to the village, not to sell, but to burn with the bison fur stock at MacDonald's place. He did this to let out his frustration and disappointment about their bad luck. In 1860, there were about 60 million bison in the American West. 20 years later, there were only about 300 left. Now there are around 30,000 bison in North America, and some Native American tribes have played a part in helping save the bison population. This is seen as one of the greatest success stories in conservation history. Moral lesson from the story: sometimes it's better to be content with what you have and make wise decisions, because greed can lead to unnecessary hardships and regrets, like trying to hunt every single bison and ending up with nothing but burnt fur.